cars to answer all your car questions. You notice that I'm wearing a hat with any advertising around? Nobody's paying me to tell you lies about products that aren't any good. I'm telling you what I know about cars from working on them for the last 50 years. October 2nd is my birthday. It'll be 51 years then. Remember, ask your questions on a live chat. I pick the best ones and I answer them. First question is August 24. Why does my Nissan Micra K12 2005 burn so much oil? Because it's a Nissan Micra. You kind of answered your own question. They're kind of cheaply made engines. Now, what you want to do is change your PCV valve. They don't cost much. And if it is stuck open, that will suck oil from the crankcase and burn it more. And those don't cost much. Change that. But from my experience with those things, the piston rings wear out, the valve seals wear out, and then they burn oil because the engine isn't sealing anymore. If you want to find out how it's actually worn out, this Tuesday video I have is about how to do a compression test on your engine. Watch that video. You use a compression tester and you can see how worn out the engine actually is. Or pay a mechanic to do the same test. Next question. Sebastian De Leon says, hey Scotty, I got an '01 Chevy Tahoe. The AC doesn't work, but it blows air when the air is turned off. It still blows a little bit of hot air. Okay, well, you got to figure out what's wrong with the AC first. On that particular truck, I should say, they made them so even when you'd have it turned off, they blow a little air because the evaporators and the heater cores would get mold and bacteria would grow. So they made them that way. That's pretty much normal. But if it's not blowing cold, there are a bunch of things that can make it not go cold. The first thing you want to do is, hey, have a guy hook up a set of gauges. Maybe you're just low on refrigerant. Then you can add refrigerant. If it's not that, then generally it starts to get expensive. If it's still got the original compressor, knowing Chevys, the compressor's probably shot. But you want to start with the simple things like, does it have enough refrigerant in it? And work from there. All AC systems leak refrigerant to some extent, or the seals would run dry from lack of lubrication from the AC oil. So if you got to fill it up every so many years, what the heck, do that. Next question. Sean Lang says, Scotty, I got a 1990 Celica. The RPM goes up and down a little bit when it's idling. Is that normal? Thanks. Well, it's normal for a vehicle that's what? That thing is 29 years old. Now, what you want to do is, I've got a good video for that that's called Make Your Engine Run Better with a Little Spray Cleaner. You get 2 cans of cleaner that cost like $14 for both of them combined, and follow the directions on that to clean it. And the other thing is, if you have a vacuum leak, it'll do that. When you get a vacuum leak in your engine, it sucks air. So the computer keeps trying to compensate for the idle, so it'll go up and down a little as it's sucking air. So check for leaks, especially on an old thing like that. A lot of times it's just one of those stupid rubber vacuum hoses. They get old and then they crack and shrink and fall off, and you could have a simple vacuum leak. It's pretty typical in a car that's that old. Next question. The Fortune Invader says, Scotty, what do you think of buying a 2007 Porsche 911 Turbo as a weekend car? It has low mileage. I heard they're reliable. Is this true? I don't know who you're listening to. Now, here's the thing. If you can get it cheap, they have one of the worst resale values in the world. So if you get that thing cheap and you want it as a weekend car, go right ahead. Just realize you don't want to pay much. I'll give you a perfect example. I got a customer bought that same car. And they bought that car and they paid like $17,000 for it. And they thought they got a deal. I said, deal, schmeal. I said, I wouldn't have given $5,000 for that car because they're endless money pits as they age. But if it's a toy and you find a guy like me to check it out before you buy it, don't ever buy one of those without having a mechanic check it out. I've got fancy equipment and all mechanics do, like my AutoSys IM 600. It's a $5,000 scan tool. When we hook these things up, we can look at all the data, see what kind of shape, and it might be in good shape, but don't pay much because they're endless money pits as they age, and they have no resale value. So if you can get it cheap and you want a toy, go right ahead. Just don't buy it and drive it every day. If it's just a weekend toy and it runs good, don't pay too much though, because even the book value on that thing is inflated. Pay a lot less than people are asking for them. Next question. Paige Foster says, why does an '03 Honda Civic Hybrid CVT 80,000 miles shutter on initial takeoff? Okay, unfortunately, you got a hybrid CVT Honda. They weren't that great vehicles. Odds are you got a problem in the CVT transmission shuttering. That's one reason I tell people not to buy used hybrid cars or expect to keep them for a really long time. You said that's an '03. Okay, it's a 16-year-old hybrid. When those CVT transmissions break down or the hybrid drive system breaks down, you're going to be spending thousands and thousands and thousands. I had a guy with one of those. I told him, get rid of it. You're nuts. Well, he wanted to fix it. So he ended up taking it to the Honda dealer. It ended up costing him like $6,500 to fix it. Car wasn't even worth near that. So, take it to any good mechanic who knows Civics and hybrids and have him hook up that fancy machine like I just showed and see what he says. But from my experience of those, it's a CVT going out, and it's more money than the vehicle's worth to fix it. And if it shutters a little bit, goes okay. Otherwise, heck, drive it that way. Next question. Jack C. says, Scotty, I got an '05 Nissan Altima. It runs great, but the underside is bad rust. There's even a hole in the passenger side floor pan. Is there any way to control the rust? What can I do? Okay. Unfortunately, like Neil Young saying, rust never sleeps, and it doesn't. Once rust starts, the metal actually rusts from the inside out, and it's rotting away. Now, where the hole is, you could cut out the hole and have a guy weld in a piece of steel or aluminum pan so you don't have a hole there. And if you want, you could try having somebody sand it all down, the underside, the rusty parts, and then spray it all with rust preventatives and undercoating and stuff, and it'll slow it down. But really, the undercoating stuff is best on a brand new vehicle when it's made. Like most new cars are made with special paint that's electrostatically put in when the frame and the body goes into a giant little lake of paint, and the electrostatic charge of one's negative, one's positive, and it sticks, even goes inside the frame. So then you don't worry about rusting. But on older cars, once they start rusting, it's pretty much, you can't do that much to stop it because it started, like I say, sand it down, get it coated, but it still keep falling apart. Once that rust starts, it's pretty much the end of a vehicle. Next question. South Green says, hey, Scotty, I got a 2007 Chrysler 300 SRT. What do you think about that? They are fun to drive. They're stinking fast cars. I got customers with them, and I love it when I work on them to road test them because they are screamers. But that said, they're extremely expensive to repair when they break. Now, if you got a standard transmission, yeah, they're fantastic. But if it's an automatic, that's one of the weakest points of those things. And as for the engine, it's a very strong engine, but you do want to take care of it. Don't listen to the garbage that people tell you can change your oil every 10,000 miles. I would change the oil on that every 5,000 miles religiously with synthetic oil. Make it last as long as it can, because when an engine or transmission does break, it's more money than the car is worth to fix it in most cases if you have an automatic. Next question. Georgia Wanta says, hey, Scotty, greeting from Moldova. My Audi A3 2010 makes a grinding noise when steering in sharp corners left and right. Even when stationary, I turn it all the way. What could be the problem? Okay, first thing you want to do is have a mechanic look at your power steering pump. Make sure it's full of fluid, and we actually have gauges we can hook up to it. And we can see if the pump's going out, and when it gets to all the way to the edge, you turn hard. If it has to work hard and it's wearing out, it can make noises, so have that checked too. The other thing is, you want to check, since you said it'll do it sometimes, even if it's sitting on the ground, you turn it all the way, you want to have a mechanic check the power steering rack, because if the rack's going out, when you go the whole way to the edge, it strains it. And if the rack's wearing, a lot of times it'll make horrible noises. Either way, it's an expensive endeavor to fix on that Audi. I mean, if it drives okay otherwise, and you have steering that doesn't bind, that goes smooth, as long as the fluid's full, I probably live with that particular problem, because the racks and the power steering pumps and those Audis cost a small fortune. Sky High says, is a turbo cool down necessary on a diesel engine? Okay. They always used to tell you to cool them down because they wanted things to last a long time. And that was a good idea. See, here's the thing. You're driving your car. The turbo spins faster than anything, hundreds of thousands of RPMs. The exhaust gas spins it, then it rams air into the engine. Most modern cars have turbos that are either oil-cooled, to use your oil engine, or oil and water-cooled, where the radiator coolant is in them and cools them off too. So they run at a pretty decent temperature that you're not going to really have any problems with it, just shutting it off when you're done driving. Unless you're racing around like a lunatic, and if you are driving as hard as you can, then I'd let it cool down for a minute or two before I'd shut it down. Now, the reason they told the really old cars, like in the 60s and 70s, to let the turbo cool down was because a lot of those were naked turbos. They didn't have water cooling, and a lot of them didn't have engine oil cooling. And so they would get really hot, and if you didn't let them idle and cool down a little bit, they would warp and they would wear out faster. But on most really modern ones that are oil and water cooled, you really don't need to cool it down when you shut them off, unless, like I say, you're racing around like a maniac. Next question. A Minty channel says, Scotty, I'm thinking about buying a 90s Ford F-150 5-speed 4-wheel drive. What's your opinion? What should I look out for? Okay. If it's in good shape, that can be an excellent truck because it's a 5-speed. The 5-speed makes the big deal of difference. The things that wear out on those are the automatic transmissions. You get a standard and you want a 4-wheel drive truck, hey, now it's a 90s. So, you know, it's pushing 30 years old. You want to always pay a mechanic like me to check it out before you buy it. So they can check the transfer case. They can check the engine. They can see, and it depends on what 90s. If it was pre-95, the scan tools don't do much. But if it's 96 up, the scan tools can tell you an awful lot. So, you know, you'd want it checked out with a scan tool if it was 95 or newer. But they can be excellent trucks. You know, they'll have a little bit of wear, but you can always fix them because parts are available for them. And they were pretty well-built cars, trucks, especially with a standard transmission. Next question. Ghost 88 says, Scotty, my 07 Corolla got mechanically stopped at 299,999 miles on the speedometer. The dealer wants $580 to replace it. Should I go to my local mechanic, replace it one from another? Yes. I mean, we mechanics do that all the time. Go to a junkyard, buy a used one and put it in. Those things are so expensive. If you want to buy a new one, they cost a ton of money. And in my case, the ones that I normally fix for my customers, I go to a junkyard, I can get a whole dash for older ones for like 70, 80 bucks. And I just pop the dash out, takes 20 minutes, and pop the new dash in, and away you go. Next question. Dominicus Danya says, Scotty, I want to buy a 95 BMW 3 Series. I hear they're very reliable, not much electronics. Is that true? Well, even the 95 has a lot of electronics on it. I mean, it's got electronic fuel injection, electronic ignition, even the air conditioning system is electronic controlled. But back in 95, the 3 Series BMWs were better made. There's no arguing that. I still got customers driving them around, the ones that really take care of their vehicles. But realize it's a very old vehicle. If you're thinking about buying one, don't buy one if it's got, you know, over 200,000 miles on it. It's going to wear out and cost you a fortune. But if you can find one that's got 100,000 miles or so and you can get it cheap enough, go right ahead. Just realize they have no resale value. So don't pay a whole bunch of money for them. And don't believe anything the owners tell you about them because everybody always lies about, oh, here's the mileage. It's never been wrecked. You want to do a little research with any of those research companies like Carfax to see if it's been wrecked, flooded, stolen, see if it's the real mileage before you put on any money on an old car like that. Next question. J-Rex says, Scotty, have you seen the guys making funny videos of you? Well, I normally don't have any time to watch other people's videos, but every once in a while I look at them, and most of them are pretty crappy. They're not funny. I've seen a few that were hilarious, and I did laugh at them. But I mean, yeah, people use swear words and just stupid music and pixelate stuff. Most of them are just dumb. But I've seen a few of them where the guys would dress up like me, and they were relatively funny. Hey, I got a sense of humor. I'm not Donald Trump. If somebody makes a funny thing about me, I will laugh my rear end off. I think it is funny. But most of them are sadly just poorly made, and they're not all that good. But I've seen a few of them that were pretty funny. Next question. Sigsy178 says, Scotty, I got an '08 Expedition. It jerks when easily cruising between 40 and 50, like it doesn't know what gear to go into. When hard accelerating, it's smooth. What's going on? Well, your transmission has a problem. That's just typical. It's, what, an 11-year-old Expedition, and the transmission is always the first thing to go on those. Now, you might want to try changing the filter and fluid. It might help it a little bit and give it a try. But since it only does it between 40 and 50, it's a transmission. If you had like an engine's problem, ignition coil or something, it would do it at all same RPMs in any gear. But if it only does it at that speed in that gear and it's like hunting for gear, it's the transmission starting to go out. Now, a lot of guys will just baby them and they'll live with it, because to rebuild that transmission is an awful lot of money. To do it right. So a lot of guys are liars, and they'll say, I can rebuild it for, $900. Then they take it apart, and then by the time you're done, it's more like $4,000. Next question. John Fraticello says, Scotty, I got a 2012 Corolla, and the left side blows hot air, and the right side blows cold air when I turn on the AC. I recharge it. The right side is very cold. Okay, if you are sure that you have the right amount of refrigerant, the only way to do it, when you watch my video, how to fill your car's AC with refrigerant, is you suck it all out with a vacuum pump, then you put in a factory load by weight or volume. And that's it. You got to do it that way. Now, if you did do that, and it's still blowing hot on the bad driver's side and not on the passenger side, which is freezing cold, then you got a problem in your blend doors on the driver's side. It's stuck, and it's not opening up to let the air blow through the AC evaporator on that side. But from my experience with those things, 99% of the time, it's just that it doesn't have the right amount of refrigerant, so that the passenger side, which is closer to the evaporator, takes most of the cool air, and by the time it makes it over to the other side, then it's blowing warm air. But like I say, if you got an actuator stuck and it's not letting that air go over to that side, you'd have to take the dash apart for that, and that is a royal pain in the butt. And really, you need one of these, like I said earlier, a really fancy scan tool that costs thousands and thousands of dollars to check the actuators to see if they're working. For me, I can check something like that in 5 minutes with one of those machines. You can't. And unfortunately, if it is an actuator, you got to pull the whole dash apart, which costs an awful lot of money. Next question. Danny Martinez says, Scotty, what do you think about BG products and services? Well, there are very good cleaners. I used to use BG cleaners all the time, but then they got really hard to find. For a while, I did a little research on the company, and for a while, they were only selling it to mechanics. They wouldn't sell it to people on the street. I guess they're now selling back on the street, but they make very good cleaners. As an example, I had a customer who had a Toyota Corolla that had 300,000 miles, and I knew the fuel injectors weren't working right because it didn't run right. When I hooked up my fancy scan tool, I could see the injectors weren't working right. So he said, well, I got this BG cleaner. I says, let's put it in. Well, we put it in, and then he drove it a couple hundred miles, and he came back, he says, it runs like a clock now. And I drove it around, and it was. So they do make some pretty good products, BG. It's just hard to find them. When I was a kid, you could buy them anywhere. We used to have it at my father's Texaco gas station. We sold it on the counter. But it got harder to find over the years. Next question. Christian Torres says, Scotty, how do you feel about Volvo bringing cars from China to the U.S.? The Volvo S90 and S60 sold in the U.S. market are made in China. I think it's ridiculous. Are the quality worse than the Swedish-built Volvo? Okay, well, Volvo's been a problem company for years. I mean, Ford had affiliations. A lot of companies did. They originally made really solid cars. I had an aunt in the 60s that had a P1800, had 1 million miles on it. I mean, those things were really well made. But they've had problems over the years. And if they're building them in China, here's the thing. The Chinese newer cars, they're built in almost totally automated factories. I know a guy who runs one over there. And he said their main problem is the labor costs. Because since the machines make most of the stuff, the guys that are there are engineers and have to be able to fix the computer robots that build them, because they run them 365 days, 24 hours a day. So they have a pretty high labor cost. There's less people to pay, but they have to be engineers. So they might not be badly made. I don't know. I've never worked on one made in China yet. But I can guarantee you the future is going that way unless people put import taxes or something on them, because it's so much cheaper to make them in China that everybody's going that way. They used to move in Mexico, and they did have quality problems there. But from what I read about the newer Chinese factories that make cars, they're pretty high tech. Next question. Anthony Martinez says the Chevy El Camino, a good project car from the 80s. Are they good quality, easy to work on? Or even a Dodge Rampage. Well, we can get a Dodge Rampage, but yeah, those El Caminos are great cars to work on. They got simple Chevy parts. My son's got one in Nashville that he inherited. One of the houses that he rents out, the guy just left it there, so they took it. Since you don't need state inspections every year, you can just drive them around forever. And if you keep fixing them, you want to fix them, and they're cool-looking vehicles, car, truck, station wagon combo. And if you do get one, get a V8, though. The V8s are the ones that are worth money. The 6s, yeah, and they're kind of slow. But the V8s, get one with a 350 V8. Those are the ones that you'd want to get if you wanted to get one. Next question. Arotis Reyes says, Scotty, is a 2011 Nissan Cube standard transmission a good car? Found for sale with 110,000 miles for $3,500. I'm not a Nissan fan by any stretch of the imagination anymore since Renault took over and merged with them. But for that price, and it's a standard transmission because they have crappy automatic transmission, could be a decent vehicle. Even then, still, do like I say, have a mechanic check it out, because once we hook up our scan tools like this, hey, we can find if there's any serious problems with the vehicle. And, hey, it could last a long time. You know, if you don't mind the looks, obviously you're looking at it, you don't mind the look. I think those Cubes are just bizarre-looking vehicles. But, hey, to each his own. If you like it and the mechanic says it's good, what the heck? Why not? Because it's a standard transmission. Next question is Mike Alejo. Scotty, what's your take if I restored a Toyota FJ40 Land Cruiser? Well, yeah, those things can run forever, and people love them. You can always sell them on. People like driving those things around. Just, if you don't mind having a vehicle that is an absolute gas hog, those things in town. I had a customer who only got like 7 miles a gallon on that behemoth. So if you don't mind crappy gas mileage, those things are great vehicles, and there's always people looking for them worldwide. If you did a real restoration and got it to look like OEM factory, some guy in Saudi Arabia might want to buy it. Who knows? They don't care about the price of gas there. They get it so cheap. Next question. Monthly Fortnite Content says, Scotty, out of all the American car companies, which one would you choose? Just asking for maybe another option besides Toyota, because maybe you're being paid by them. Well, I'm not being paid by them. And if you watched the video the other day, I said that Honda makes better engines than Toyota. So, I'm not getting paid by anybody. Like I said, I'm giving my 50 years experience of cars to tell you what to buy. If you did want to buy an American car, go Ford. They're better than all the others by Ford. Ford and GM used to be, neck and neck, but GM quality's gone. And Chrysler was always crap, and then Fiat bought them. It's like the merger of two bad companies. Sort of like when Sears and Kmart merged. Two bad companies merged, and good things don't come out of it. But the Ford, you can get a decent Ford. Still, their vehicles are pretty good. Next question. Captain Cowboy says, Scotty, what do you think of the 85 Chevy Corvette with the manual transmission? I'm considering buying one in the near future. Yeah, with a manual transmission, those things can be fun, I mean, and you want to research your model, though, because each model has values radically different than others, and whether it's a convertible or not. Let's say you're buying one that isn't a convertible. Don't pay much. They're not worth anything. The only ones that really go for high resale values are the convertibles. If it's a convertible, it's always going to be worth a certain amount of money. But always research different year Corvettes and what they go for and how rare they are before you plunk out any money. Now, since it's so old, you can't check them with computers. But I would still advise having a mechanic check it out first just to drive it around, bring his gauges, and check out a few things so you're not getting ripped off. Unless you're buying one really cheap and you're going to fix it up and then you don't care. Next question. Jacob Palmer says, what about a 1985 Toyota Supra? I would not buy one used because those had notoriously weak cams. Their cams were always breaking on the things. And I had a customer with one. It was a beautiful red car. I mean, it was beautiful. It turned heads. But as it kept breaking down, and a lot of the parts, even Toyota didn't sell anymore because it was a limited production. And, unless you want to make a drift car and you don't care, you're going to throw a different engine. Guys love those for drift cars because they're rear-wheel drive. And if you're going to mess around with something like that, be my guest. Put whatever engine you want in, put in a V8 or something, have fun. But if you're just going to use it as a stock car, I wouldn't advise buying one unless you want to rebuild the whole thing and put a ton of money into it. And you'll never get it back because they don't have that high resale value. They still made hundreds of thousands of them. It's not like it's a limited run of a few thousand. They made a lot of them, so they'll never be really collector's items. Next question. Francisco Calderon says, what do you think about the Honda Del Sol? Well, they were kind of a failed car. They didn't sell that many of them. But for what they are, they were a good little runabout car. I got customers with them. The ones with automatic transmissions, they were kind of crappy. But the ones that had standard transmissions, if you like Hondas, they were zippy little cars for what they are. And a certain amount of people liked them. There was nothing wrong with the vehicles. But they did stop making them for lack of sales. They really weren't sporty enough looking for most people. But if you don't mind the way it looks and you can find a good used one, they can be fun cars to drive for a long time. Next question. Jorge Osorio says, Scotty, what do you think of the new Alfa Romeos like the Quadrifoglio? Well, they're typical Italian, especially typical Alfa Romeo. They put technology in those things. They put a lot of horsepower. Man, they're fun to drive. But they break all the time. They're always breaking. They have no resale value, and they're way overpriced. I was watching those Top Gear guys, the old ones. I only like the old guys. The new one's garbage, but the old guys were really funny. And they had the Italian Alfa Romeo, and the one guy said, hey, I'd rather get the Mazda Miata. It's more fun to drive, and, you can buy 3 of them for the price of one of the Alfa Romeos, and it's going to outlast them and never break down, If you got a lot of money and want a fancy sports car to zip around, then go ahead and get one. They're fun, but you lose your money, and they fall apart and cost a fortune to fix. And here in the United States, hardly anybody knows how to work on Alfa Romeos, too. Next question. The Spazinator. Hey, I got an '04 Ford Explorer. He called it an exploder. A lot of guys call him that. And my air never comes out of the correct vents, so I'm never able to get the air to hit my windshield for winter driving. Okay, you got a problem. Probably knowing those in the control unit. The control unit tells the actuators what to do. And if it's not going to the correct ones, usually it's the control unit. Now, the actuators can go bad too. It's a complicated thing. That's why I tell people when you get those, you got to pay a mechanic. This machine here costs $5,000. When we hook it up, we can check for codes, and then we can actually go into the actuator system and say, actuate this one on the driver's side, and then we look at the data on the scan tool, and you see, oh, it opened 90 degrees, or it didn't open at all, or it didn't send the message, and then you can pinpoint it down. It's complicated stuff, but that's generally, the control units generally go bad on those and cause that. Next question. Julio Vasquez says, what do you think of high-performance ignition coils? Okay, when I was a kid, guys used to sell a lot of them because it was old-fashioned points of condensers, distributors, that every time a mechanical set of points would open, it would fire, close, open, it would fire. So it was mechanical. And a high firing coil would spark plugs better, and it would warm them more efficiently. But modern cars, man, most of them have coil-on plugs now. They're already set up that way, and you're throwing your money away on something that, makes a bigger spark. Those sparks have, hundreds of thousands of volts. They work perfectly fine the way they are. The same thing as these fools that go out and buy fancy spark plugs. Oh, we're getting more horsepower, better gas mileage by just changing this to this different spark plug. If If that was the case, they'd build them that way. The factory spark plug that comes with any modern car is the best one designed for that vehicle. And the same thing with ignition coils. Don't start changing. I know guys will do the same thing with fuel injectors. They'll say, oh, I'm going to put a bigger fuel injector so it goes faster. It might go slower because the computer's set up for one system and you mess with it, it's not going to work right if you change it. Next question. Steve O. Johnson says, Scotty, my father's 04 Pontiac Grand Prix with the GT package, not supercharged. The drive belt slips off twice. There's something I can do to prevent it from happening again. Okay, there's generally two reasons they slip off. If it has an automatic tensioner, replace it. It's not tensioning it right and it slips off. Now, if it doesn't and you got to manually adjust them, then look at the belts with a straight edge. Get a piece of wood or something straight edge. And odds are a bolt has come loose on one of them, like an alternator, and it's sitting cockeyed, or one of the pulleys is bent, it's cockeyed, and then that'll make it slip off. It's always got to be something out of alignment that'll make it fly off if they're tensioned correctly. Well, that's it for today. Remember, every day of the week I put up a video on the Scotty Kilmer channel on YouTube, so subscribe, and you'll never miss another one if you click on the notifications bell so you're notified. And I'm here every Saturday on YouTube Live at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time and Thursday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'll catch you Thursday.